Well, every time he sees me, he smiles, gives me a hug, and he says, "I'm proud of you." Not because you made it to the league, but because when you were younger, you listened. And I think if I wouldn't listen to him, I wouldn't be here right now. I would either be in jail or doing something else. It might, but basketball is a game of reactions. If you make a move to the middle and a guy take your middle, you got to react the other way. And I have a lot of tricks in my bags. I have a lot of tricks.
A lot of stuff we haven't seen yet?
That's right.
When are you going to break these out?
I don't know.
Shaquille O'Neal didn't just dominate the NBA, he bent it to his will. 7 feet 1 inch, over 300 pounds, and faster than most forwards. He didn't just post up defenders. He buried them under the rim, shattered backboards, and turned entire playoff series into one-man block parties. From the moment he arrived in 1992, the league was never the same. But for all the destruction he caused on the floor, Shaq also understood the game on a deeper level. He respected greatness. He studied it. He remembered every legend who challenged him, inspired him, or pushed the standard higher. And when Shaquille O'Neal talks about his favorite players, it's not just a list of highlight reels. It's a reflection of the men who defined what basketball meant to him. These are players who shaped the eras before and during his reign, the ones he looked up to as a kid, battled as a young star, and admired even after he became the Diesel. Some broke records. Some rewrote the way the game was played. All of them earned Shaq's respect the hard way. This isn't a story about stats alone. It's about influence. It's about greatness, recognizing greatness. These are the 6 players Shaquille O'Neal calls his favorites. But before proceeding, please take a second and subscribe. And like this video, it will be very motivation for us. Michael Jordan. For Shaquille O'Neal, Michael Jordan wasn't just a legend. He was the gold standard. Shaq entered the league in 1992, just as Jordan was at the absolute peak of his powers. At that point, Chicago Bulls had already won 2 straight championships, and Jordan had turned basketball into a global phenomenon. He wasn't just dominating games, he was defining an era. For a young center coming into the league, Jordan was the figure every player measured themselves against. And Shaq, for all his own dominance, openly admitted that he admired Jordan's intensity, precision, and killer instinct from the moment he stepped onto an NBA floor. Their first meeting came on January 16, 1993. Shaq's Orlando Magic went up against Jordan's Bulls in Orlando. Jordan scored 64 points that night, one of the highest of his entire career. Shaq scored 29 and grabbed 24 rebounds, and Orlando eventually won in overtime 128-124. But the most telling part wasn't the score. It was how Shaq reacted afterward. He didn't boast about beating MJ. He talked about what it meant to face him. He called it a moment he'd never forget, the ultimate test. Shaq has often said that Jordan's presence forced everyone to elevate their game. It wasn't just about numbers, it was about approach. Jordan treated every night like war. He trained like no one else. He played with a precision that made mistakes feel like sins. And while Shaq's personality was larger than life, on the court, he respected players who didn't just talk, they delivered. No one embodied that more than Jordan. In the early to mid-1990s, Shaq's Magic became one of the few young teams that actually challenged the Bulls dynasty. But there's a wrinkle here. In 1993, Jordan retired briefly after the tragic death of his father. When he returned late in the 1994-95 season, it set up one of the most memorable playoff matchups of Shaq's career, the 1995 Eastern Conference semifinals. Orlando stunned the basketball world by defeating Chicago 4-2. Jordan was still finding his rhythm after his baseball break, but the battle was intense. Shaq averaged 24.3 points and 13.2 rebounds in that series, while Jordan dropped 31 points per game. That was Jordan in what most would call a down stretch, and even then, he was putting up MVP caliber numbers. Shaq often points to that series as a turning point in his career, because to beat Jordan, even temporarily, meant something monumental. But the story didn't end there. Jordan came back with a vengeance. The following season, the Bulls went 72-10, the best regular season record in NBA history at the time. When they met the Magic in the 1996 Eastern Conference Finals, Jordan was back to full strength. Chicago swept Orlando 4-0. Jordan averaged 29.5 points, 5.8 rebounds, and 4.8 assists while shooting over 50% from the field. Shaq played well, but the difference was Jordan's absolute control of the series, his relentless mid-range game, his defensive leadership, his to exploit every weakness. Shaq later said, "That was the moment I realized, this is what greatness really looks like. It's not just a game, it's preparation, it's mindset, it's domination." Jordan's influence on Shaq extended far beyond head-to-head matchups. Shaq has repeatedly credited Jordan with teaching him what it means to carry a brand, to elevate teammates, and to understand that basketball superstardom is about more than highlight reels. Jordan built the modern NBA icon blueprint: global reach, obsessive competitiveness, and an aura that transcended the game itself. Shaq studied that closely, later becoming one of the most recognizable athletes on the planet himself. There's also mutual respect between the two. Jordan has spoken highly of Shaq's physical dominance, calling him the most unstoppable force of his era. Meanwhile, Shaq has consistently named Jordan as his favorite player of all time, not just because of the scoring titles, 6 championships, or 5 MVPs, but because of the way he commanded respect. Every arena Jordan entered felt different. Every game was a measuring stick. Even stylistically, their games couldn't have been more different. Jordan was surgical: footwork, mid-range jumpers, clutch scoring. Shaq was thunder, raw power, unstoppable in the paint. But their mentalities aligned. Neither accepted losing as an option. Shaq often says that while he modeled parts of his larger-than-life persona on pro wrestlers and entertainers, the basketball side, the winning side, came from studying MJ. And there's another layer: Jordan's work ethic. Many former players have said that what separated MJ wasn't just talent, it was the refusal to be outworked. Shaq, during his early years in Orlando, admitted he wasn't always as focused in the offseason as he could have been. But as he matured, especially after joining Los Angeles Lakers, he often cited Jordan's relentless approach as something he admired deeply. It's why he respected him, not just for what he did, but how he did it. Their paths crossed at several iconic NBA moments, from All-Star games to Olympic teams, and every time Shaq spoke about Jordan, it carried a tone of reverence. When Jordan turned 60, Shaq called him the GOAT forever. Not a debate, just a fact in his eyes. Because for Shaq, it was simple. He's battled many legends. He's outmuscled and overpowered some of the greatest big men ever. But there was only one player he never thought he'd surpass: Michael Jeffrey Jordan, the ultimate competitor, the global icon, the player who showed an entire generation, including Shaquille O'Neal, what greatness truly looks like. Hakeem Olajuwon. When Shaquille O'Neal talks about greatness, there's a different tone in his voice when the name Hakeem Olajuwon comes up. Shaq has always been larger than life, the most dominant big man of his generation, but even he's admitted that there was one opponent who truly humbled him on the basketball court, not because of brute force or intimidation, but because of something much harder to stop: skill. In Shaq's own words, Hakeem Olajuwon was the best big man I ever went up against. Their careers intersected at a pivotal moment in NBA history. In the early 1990s, Shaq was the young, unstoppable phenom from Louisiana State University, 7 feet tall, 300 pounds, faster and stronger than anyone his size had a right to be. Hakeem, meanwhile, was the established master, a 2-time Defensive Player of the Year, an MVP, and by 1995, already an NBA champion with Houston Rockets. While Shaq represented the future, Olajuwon embodied everything that came from years of refinement: elite footwork, patience, and balance that no center in the league could match. Their defining collision came in the 1995 NBA Finals. Shaq was just 23 years old, leading Orlando Magic to the franchise's first Finals appearance. The Magic had just knocked out Chicago Bulls and a returning Michael Jordan. They were young, fearless, and viewed as the next great dynasty. But the Rockets, led by Hakeem, were something they hadn't yet faced: a seasoned champion who understood how to control not just games, but entire series. The numbers tell the story of that duel. Over 4 games, Olajuwon averaged 32.8 points, 11.5 rebounds, 5.5 assists, and 2 blocks per game, shooting 48.3% from the field. Shaq wasn't bad either: 28.0 points, 12.5 rebounds, and 6.3 assists on 59.5% shooting. But every big play, every clutch moment, every possession that mattered swung Hakeem's way. Houston swept Orlando 4-0. It wasn't a blowout in effort. Shaq fought every possession, but it was a masterclass in timing, patience, and basketball IQ. Hakeem didn't overpower Shaq. He outplayed him. He used footwork so smooth and deceptive that even someone as massive and athletic as Shaq found himself reacting half a beat late. The Dream Shake wasn't just a move. It was a full arsenal: pump fakes, pivots, drop steps, and counters, all delivered with surgical precision. Every time Shaq thought he had the angle sealed off, Hakeem would spin the other way. Every time Shaq went up to contest, Hakeem found space. Shaq has since admitted that was the series that forced him to grow up. "He gave me a lesson," Shaq once said. "He was better, period." It wasn't bitterness, it was admiration. Shaq had never faced someone who made him feel like that, a man who didn't just match his production, but controlled the rhythm of the game. And this is important. Shaq respects players who can dominate their position in different ways. He was power. Hakeem was precision. Shaq broke rims. Hakeem broke defensive schemes. And in the finals, precision won. But their story goes deeper than a single series. Shaq often cites Hakeem as the center who pushed him the most, not because they had a long rivalry, they only met 13 times in the regular season and playoffs combined, but because every matchup forced him to adapt. Olajuwon wasn't just a scorer, he was one of the greatest defenders in NBA history. He finished his career as the all-time leader in blocked shots, 3,830, with 9 seasons averaging 3 or more blocks per game. Unlike many shot blockers, he didn't chase stats. He anchored entire defenses, forcing guards and big men alike to change their angles. In their head-to-head matchups, Hakeem won 9 out of 13 games. He averaged 23.6 points, 9.6 rebounds, and 2.5 blocks against Shaq's 22.9 points and 11.5 rebounds. What made Olajuwon special was how he neutralized Shaq's greatest strength. Shaq lived at the rim, dunks, lobs, power finishes. Hakeem took away the easy looks, forced him to work, and punished him at the other end with finesse. There was also respect off the court. Shaq has mentioned that before their first finals meeting, he didn't fully study film or prepare the way veterans did. After 1995, that changed. I started watching film after that. I learned you can't just overpower everybody, Shaq said later. Hakeem taught me that. That lesson laid the groundwork for his dominance later with Los Angeles Lakers, where he became a 3-time Finals MVP. Hakeem's game wasn't loud, but it was undeniable. He won back-to-back championships in 1994 and 1995, both without another superstar beside him. He was the 1994 MVP, a 12-time All-Star, and a 2-time Defensive Player of the Year. In 1994, he became the only player in NBA history to win MVP, Finals MVP, and Defensive Player of the Year in the same season. That kind of complete dominance is what earned Shaq's respect. Shaq has often said that if he could borrow anyone's skill, it would be Hakeem's footwork. For all of Shaq's power and athleticism, he recognized that Hakeem's foundation was what made him special. He called him a gentleman on and off the court, a quiet assassin who didn't need to talk to prove his point. And years later, when Shaq's own career was winding down, he never once shied away from acknowledging who gave him his toughest test. I was young, and he was a master, Shaq said, and the master beat the student. In a career full of battles against giants, it's telling that the one-man Shaq singles out with pure respect is Hakeem Olajuwon, because even the most dominant force of his generation had to face the one player who could beat him with craft, patience, and intelligence. And Shaq never forgot it. When Shaquille O'Neal talks about Kobe Bryant, it isn't just admiration, it's legacy. Unlike Michael Jordan or Hakeem Olajuwon, this wasn't someone he looked up to from afar. Kobe was the man standing next to him, pushing him every single day. Their story is layered with championships, tension, respect, and one of the most dominant stretches in modern basketball history. When Shaq joined Los Angeles Lakers in 1996, he was already a superstar entering his prime. Kobe arrived that same summer as an 18-year-old rookie, raw but fearless. They couldn't have been more different. Shaq was charismatic, playful, a showman who embraced the spotlight. Kobe was quiet, calculating, relentless. From day one, Kobe didn't just want to be on Shaq's team. He wanted to stand on the same level. Early on, Shaq was the focal point of the franchise, averaging 26.2 points and 12.5 rebounds in his first season in Los Angeles. Kobe came off the bench, showing flashes of what would come later, the confidence to take big shots, even in failure. But it was his mentality that stuck with Shaq. He remembers watching the kids stay in the gym long after practice ended, challenging veterans to one-on-one games and approaching every drill like it was Game 7 of the finals. He was different, Shaq would later say. Even then, you could tell he wasn't going to be normal. As the years passed, their paths began to align. Kobe's skill level grew at a stunning pace. Shaq, meanwhile, entered the most dominant stretch of his career. When Phil Jackson arrived as head coach in 1999, everything clicked. The triangle offense gave them balance. Shaq controlled the paint. Kobe carved up defenses from the perimeter. Together, they led the Lakers to 3 straight NBA championships from 2000 to 2002. Their 2000 season set the tone. Shaq averaged 29.7 points, 13.6 rebounds, and 3 blocks, winning MVP. But when the playoffs tightened, Kobe rose. Game 7 of the 2000 Western Conference Finals against Portland Trail Blazers remains iconic. Shaq finished with 18 points and 9 rebounds, but Kobe controlled the fourth quarter with 25 points, 11 rebounds, and 7 assists. His alley-oop to Shaq down the stretch became one of the most replayed moments of the era. Shaq running down the court, pointing at Kobe, the building shaking. The 2001 playoffs were their peak as a duo. Shaq averaged 30.4 points and 15.4 rebounds. Kobe averaged 29.4 points, 7.3 rebounds, and 6.1 assists. They went 15-1, one of the most dominant postseason runs in NBA history. Kobe, just 22, matched Shaq's intensity game for game. No team, not San Antonio Spurs, not Philadelphia 76ers, could handle both forces at once. But under the banners and parades, tensions simmered. Kobe's relentless drive often clashed with Shaq's leadership style. Shaq believed the offense should always flow through him in the post. Kobe wanted to close games on his terms. Their personalities clashed in practices, interviews, and film rooms. It wasn't fake drama, it was two ultra-competitive players refusing to yield. And yet, that same tension pushed both of them higher. Shaq would later admit, "He made me work, made me better, he made me stay in shape. Because if I didn't, he'd be right there." By 2002, they were untouchable. Shaq averaged 36.3 points and 12.3 rebounds in the finals against New Jersey Nets, while Kobe added 26.8 points, 5.8 rebounds, and 5.3 assists. They completed their three-peat, something no team had done since Chicago Bulls. But success didn't smooth everything over. Ego, leadership disputes, and organizational politics eventually pulled the partnership apart. In 2004, after losing in the finals to Detroit Pistons, Shaq was traded to Miami Heat. For years, their rivalry dominated headlines. But behind that, there was always respect. Shaq won his fourth ring in 2006. Kobe led the Lakers to back-to-back titles in 2009 and 2010. When Kobe won his fifth, Shaq publicly congratulated him. When Shaq's jersey was retired, Kobe was there. And at the 2009 All-Star Game, they shared co-MVP honors, laughing, joking, letting the world see the bond beneath the battles. Their relationship took on a different weight after Kobe's passing in 2020. Shaq's tribute was raw and honest. "We pushed each other to greatness," he said. "We argued, we fought. But in the end, we always respected each other. He was my little brother." Kobe Bryant wasn't just one of Shaq's favorite players, he was his most important basketball partner. The championships, the tension, the shared triumphs and scars, they defined an era. And when Shaq reflects on his career today, he doesn't just talk about what they won together. He talks about how Kobe pushed him, challenged him, and matched him step for step. For Shaq, Kobe will always be the teammate who made him better. When Shaquille O'Neal was a kid growing up in New Jersey, there was one player he idolized more than anyone, Magic Johnson. Long before Shaq was shattering backboards or collecting MVPs, he was a teenager watching Magic run the floor with elegance and command. It wasn't just what Magic did, it was how he did it. The smile, the flair, the way he turned basketball into a show. Magic didn't just play in the NBA. For Shaq, he was the NBA. When Shaq signed with Los Angeles Lakers in 1996, he knew exactly whose shadow he was stepping into. The Lakers weren't just any franchise, they were Magic's team. From 1979 to 1991, Magic had led them to 9 NBA Finals and 5 championships, redefining what it meant to be a point guard. At 6'9", he controlled pace like no one before him. Showtime basketball, the fast breaks, the no-look passes. The energy was born from his hands. Shaq often said, "I wanted to bring Showtime back." What made their story even more interesting was that in 1996, Magic briefly returned to the court, playing 32 games after 4 years away. It wasn't prime Showtime anymore, but for Shaq, sharing a locker room, even for a short stretch, with the man he grew up watching was surreal. Magic embraced him immediately, calling him the next great Laker. It was a passing of the torch that would shape everything that came next. Magic's influence on Shaq extended well beyond basketball highlights. He was one of the first NBA stars to truly understand what it meant to build a brand. His charisma helped grow the NBA globally during the 1980s. Magic showed that a player could be more than just an athlete. He could be the face of a city, a movement, a culture. Shaq absorbed that lesson. When his own superstardom exploded in the late 1990s, he modeled much of his off-court persona on Magic's example: fun, approachable, larger than life. On the floor, Shaq admired Magic's control. Magic wasn't the fastest player on the court, but he dictated the speed of the game. In the Showtime era, the Lakers became the deadliest transition team in the league, with Magic averaging 11.2 assists per game and leading the NBA in that category 4 times. Shaq watched how Magic's playmaking made everyone around him better. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, James Worthy, Byron Scott. It wasn't about overpowering opponents. It was about elevating teammates. When Shaq became the anchor of the Lakers years later, he wanted to recapture that spirit, not just dominance, but joy. Magic also taught Shaq something about leadership. He was the bridge between stars, the voice that kept the team steady. Shaq, with his own larger-than-life personality, respected that balance. His greatest Lakers teams in the early 2000s, built on fast breaks, lob plays, and confidence, carried echoes of Magic's Showtime legacy. Then there was the city itself. Magic was Los Angeles. No athlete represented it more during the 1980s. When Shaq arrived, he wanted to be that same figure for a new generation. In interviews, Shaq has said Magic taught him how to own LA, not just play there. And like Magic, Shaq built his life in the city, in entertainment, business, and culture, far beyond the hardwood. Magic's support was personal too. He was courtside during the 2000 NBA Finals when Shaq delivered his signature performance, averaging 38 points and 16.7 rebounds against Indiana Pacers. Shaq said afterward, seeing Magic there smiling, that meant everything. It wasn't just winning a title. It was validating the dream of carrying on a legacy. Statistically, Magic's career is historic. 5 NBA championships, 3 MVPs, 3 Finals MVPs, 12 All-Star selections, and the highest career assists per game average in NBA history. But Shaq doesn't just call him a favorite for the numbers, he calls him a favorite because Magic represented the standard. The way he led, entertained, and lifted the sport is what Shaq aspired to replicate in his own way. Shaq has also often spoken about Magic's example beyond basketball. Magic became a business icon, proving that athletes could build empires off the court. Shaq followed that path, investing, acting, broadcasting, all while crediting Magic for showing him it was possible. For Shaq, Magic Johnson wasn't just a legend of the past. He was a blueprint, a cultural anchor, the face of an era that Shaq grew up admiring and eventually helped carry forward. And when Shaq talks about his favorite players, Magic isn't just on the list. He's part of the reason Shaq ever became Shaq in the first place. When LeBron James came into the league in 2003, Shaquille O'Neal was already a 3-time champion and one of the most dominant players the NBA had ever seen. But even at the height of his own stardom, Shaq recognized something extraordinary the first time he saw LeBron play. He said many times that he knew right away, this kid was different, not just talented, special. LeBron entered the NBA with unprecedented hype. At just 18 years old, he was on magazine covers, national TV broadcasts, and carrying the weight of a franchise, Cleveland Cavaliers, on his shoulders. Most players would crumble under that kind of spotlight. LeBron thrived in it. Shaq, who understood the pressure of being a superstar in Los Angeles, respected that more than anything. In those early years, he admired how LeBron handled the storm without losing focus. Shaq's first real on-court encounter with LeBron came during LeBron's rookie season. Shaq was still the face of Los Angeles Lakers. LeBron was just getting started, but their matchup in January 2004 was electric. LeBron scored 32 points that night in Cleveland. Shaq finished with 26 and 15. The Lakers won 106-98, but it wasn't the box score that stuck with Shaq. It was how poised LeBron was. He looked like a veteran running the offense, controlling tempo, refusing to be intimidated. Shaq said later that it reminded him of how he felt watching Magic Johnson as a kid, a star who made the game feel bigger. Their paths eventually crossed as teammates in the 2009-10 season when Shaq joined the Cavaliers. By then, LeBron was the reigning MVP, a 7-time All-Star, and the undisputed face of the league. Shaq was 37, no longer the unstoppable force of his prime, but still respected. For the first time, he saw LeBron's leadership and preparation up close. What impressed him most wasn't just LeBron's physical gifts, it was his discipline. He was always the first in the gym, often the last to leave. Shaq has said repeatedly that LeBron's commitment to longevity and conditioning changed how players thought about careers. LeBron led the Cavs to the best record in the NBA that season at 61-21, averaging 29.7 points, 7.3 rebounds, and 8.6 assists. Shaq contributed as a veteran presence, but even he admitted that was LeBron's team. He ran everything Shaq has since credited LeBron's professionalism and drive as something that even a seasoned veteran could learn from. Shaq also respected how LeBron expanded the game beyond scoring. He wasn't just a 30-point scorer. He could rebound like a forward, pass like a point guard, and defend all 5 positions. His 2007 finals run, carrying a young Cavaliers team past Detroit Pistons and into the championship round, was one of the moments Shaq often pointed to when talking about why LeBron belongs among the greatest. He took a team that shouldn't have been there and got them to the finals, Shaq once said. That's leadership. There's also a level of admiration for LeBron's adaptability. Shaq's prime came in an era dominated by traditional centers. LeBron came along and redefined versatility. Whether it was running the break, setting up teammates, or closing games, he became a system unto himself. And Shaq, a student of basketball history, recognized how rare that was. Then there's the business side. Shaq has always respected players who think beyond the court. He followed in the footsteps of Magic Johnson, building his own brand. LeBron took that model and elevated it. From launching media companies to owning sports franchises and becoming a global ambassador, LeBron built a platform that transcended basketball. Shaq has publicly praised him for how he leveraged his career to create generational impact. Their bond is also personal. Shaq often refers to LeBron as the chosen one, not mockingly, but with respect. He said LeBron is the rare star who actually lived up to the impossible expectations set for him as a teenager, and not just for a few years, for 2 decades. Shaq has watched him pass milestones, 4 championships, 4 MVPs, 2 Olympic gold medals, and eventually surpassing Kareem Abdul-Jabbar as the NBA's all-time leading scorer. What also resonates with Shaq is how LeBron has aged. He's spoken about how LeBron's ability to maintain elite production into his late 30s is unlike anything he's seen. It's why Shaq often places him in the same breath as Jordan, Magic, and Kareem, not just for what he's done, but how long he's done it. When LeBron broke Kareem's scoring record in February 2023, Shaq's reaction was simple: we're witnessing history. On top of that, Shaq has always valued leadership through presence. LeBron isn't a trash talker in the traditional sense. He leads through control of the game, of the locker room, of the moment. For Shaq, that's as intimidating as a thunderous dunk. When asked to name his favorite players, Shaq doesn't hesitate to include LeBron, not because they were longtime teammates, but because LeBron represents everything he respects: dominance, longevity, leadership, and impact. He saw him as a rookie, shared the floor with him as a teammate, and watched him rewrite record books as a legend. For Shaq, LeBron James isn't just one of the greatest of all time. He's one of the few who carried the game forward, a player who arrived with all the pressure in the world and somehow exceeded it. Among all the players Shaquille O'Neal has admired over his career, Charles Barkley holds a unique place, not because they were teammates or longtime rivals, but because Barkley represented something Shaq has always valued: authenticity. Long before Shaq became the face of the league, Barkley was already a superstar with a larger-than-life personality, a Hall of Fame resume, and a game that broke the mold. And just like Shaq, Chuck didn't just play basketball. He owned the floor with power, charisma, and blunt honesty. Barkley entered the NBA in 1984, almost a decade before Shaq. By the time Shaq joined Orlando Magic in 1992, Barkley was already an MVP, a perennial all-star, and one of the league's most unstoppable forwards. Listed at 6'6", but realistically closer to 6'4", Barkley wasn't built like a traditional power forward. Yet he dominated the paint against bigger men through sheer strength, explosiveness, and relentless energy. In an era defined by giants, Hakeem Olajuwon, Patrick Ewing, David Robinson, Barkley was the undersized force that no one could contain. For a young Shaq entering the league, watching Barkley was a lesson in how mentality can be just as dangerous as size. Barkley averaged 22.1 points and 11.7 rebounds for his career, shot over 54% from the field, and won the 1993 MVP award after leading Phoenix Suns to a 62-20 record. That same year, he faced Michael Jordan and the Chicago Bulls in the NBA Finals, putting up 27.3 points, 13 rebounds, and 5.5 assists per game. Even in defeat, Barkley's fight against Jordan elevated his legacy. Shaq, who was still a young star in Orlando at the time, paid attention. Their relationship went beyond admiration from afar. Shaq and Barkley actually shared the court as opponents several times during the mid to late 90s. Those games were bruising, loud, and entertaining. Everything you'd expect from 2 of the most physical players of their generation. When Barkley played for the Houston Rockets, their matchups became instant TV highlights. Barkley, despite giving up nearly 7 inches and over 50 pounds, never backed down from Shaq in the post. Shaq respected that deeply. "He was one of the only guys who didn't care how big I was," Shaq later said. "He came right at me." One memorable clash came on November 10, 1999. In a game between the Lakers and Rockets, Barkley, then 36, went head-to-head with Shaq in the paint. They jawed, banged, battled, and entertained everyone in the building. Shaq finished with 31 points and 13 rebounds. Barkley had 18 points and 13 boards. It wasn't about the stat sheet, it was about the attitude. Barkley wasn't afraid of anyone, and that's what Shaq admired most. Shaq has often said that Barkley taught him something crucial about how to be a superstar. Never lose your edge, and never lose yourself. Barkley was brutally honest with the media, unfiltered in his opinions, and unafraid to speak out, even if it cost him popularity. Shaq, who grew into a global icon himself, always respected that Barkley didn't conform to what people expected a superstar to sound like. That authenticity later became part of Shaq's own media personality. There was also a basketball intelligence to Barkley's game that often got overlooked. He wasn't just a scorer or rebounder. Barkley was one of the best passing forwards of his era. At his peak in 1992-93, he averaged 5.1 assists per game, often initiating the offense himself, something unusual for a power forward at the time. He could lead the break after grabbing a rebound, bulldozing through defenders like a freight train, but with the vision to hit open shooters. Shaq appreciated that combination of brute force and skill because it mirrored what he valued in his own game: dominance with purpose. Off the court, Shaq and Barkley built a completely different kind of bond. What started as respect between competitors turned into one of the NBA's most entertaining friendships. When Shaq retired, their chemistry on Inside the NBA became legendary. They bicker, argue, and roast each other constantly, but beneath all of it is mutual respect. Shaq has said many times that Barkley is one of the few people in the business who can challenge him without crossing a line. "He's my guy," Shaq said. "We go at it, but we love each other." That bond is rooted in what they both represent. Barkley was one of the first modern NBA superstars to blend dominance on the court with personality off it. Shaq took that model and expanded it, but he's always credited Barkley with setting the tone. Their connection also runs through Team USA. Barkley was a star of the 1992 Dream Team, and by the time Shaq joined USA Basketball men's national team in 1994, Barkley was already a veteran presence in that ecosystem. Shaq has said that seeing Barkley command a room, not just a court, was eye-opening. Statistically, Barkley's resume is among the best of any power forward to play the game. 11 All-Star selections, an MVP, 11 All-NBA honors, and a spot on the NBA's 50th and 75th anniversary teams. But for Shaq, the numbers are only part of it. He admired the way Barkley carried himself. Fearless, blunt, unapologetically himself. And even now, decades after their playing days ended, Shaq continues to name Barkley among his favorite players. Not because they always agreed, not because they were teammates, but because Barkley embodied everything Shaq respects in a player: toughness, skill, intelligence, and a personality too big to fit into a neat box. For Shaq, Charles Barkley isn't just a Hall of Famer. He's the example of how to be real, on the court, in front of the camera, and for an entire generation of fans. And that's the thing about Charles Barkley. For all the noise, all the chaos, and all the battles, Shaq's respect for him never faded. But not every rivalry ends in friendship. Some stick with you forever. If you want to see the other side of that story, check out Scottie Pippen names 6 players he hated, a list fueled by bruises, grudges, and unforgettable wars on the hardwood. Please do not forget to subscribe to the channel and like the video. Share your thoughts in the comment section.